Hi, I'm Michael Hartman.
I'm Naomi Liu.
And I'm Mike Rizzo. And this is OpsCast,
a podcast for marketing ops pros
and RevOps pros.
Created by the Mo Pros, the #1 community for marketing operations professionals.
Tune in to each episode as we chat with real professionals to help elevate you in your marketing operations career.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of OpsCast, brought to you by marketingops.com, powered by the Mo Pros. I'm your host, Michael Hartman, flying solo yet again. I know that Mike and Naomi both wish they could be here. So today we are going to be talking to an expert in all things marketing ops and especially analytics. Today we are talking about how to improve predictability and planning of pipeline metrics. And joining us for the conversation is Rachel Squire. I had to write this down because I still think of you by your maiden name. So Rachel is currently the founder and principal consultant of Mobi Solutions, a consultancy she started not too long ago. Prior to starting her company, Rachel held both in-house and consulting roles in marketing operations, analytics, and technology. And she started her career in IT and teaching math at the college level. So Rachel, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me and for the great intro.
Yeah. Well, so for our audience, Rachel and I have known each other for a long time because I was one of her clients. So, and we're still get along. So that should tell you that something. I don't know that that's always the case.
Either a good client, good consultant, hopefully,
or both.
One or the other.
Yeah. I was your best client, right?
Oh, obviously.
See, there you go. We'll stop there. All right, so let's start. It's always fun for me to hear people's career paths, and I know a little more about yours than most. But why don't you maybe can talk us through your career path from your in-house. You did the teaching. You were back. You went to agency, back in-house, and solopreneur now. So talk about how that all happened, how you went from a graduate math program and teaching math to marketing ops, and anything that you learned along the way, especially like outside of marketing ops or marketing, even anything you learned from your marketing training that you find valuable in your career or have found valuable.
Yeah, I'll try to spare the boring details, but my career, I think like a lot of people, a lot of searching at the beginning. A lot of soul searching and trying to figure out what I want to do until I die. Very daunting. And so when I finished undergrad, I finished in math. I majored in math. I went to PFL. They're like a Sendoso competitor. And I started my career there. I had interned there throughout college, and I was in the IT department initially. And I just did that for a few months. I didn't do it very long. And then I was like, okay, I want to go to grad school. I miss math. So I went to grad school. I spent 1 year.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard anyone's utter that phrase.
I will never utter it again because I no longer miss it. I did at the time. And I spent a year in grad school studying math and trying to get my master's degree. And, I thought I missed it. I didn't actually miss it that much. And after 1 year, I had already known I didn't really want to continue with the program, but I didn't know what else I wanted to do. They had kind of a staffing gap. So I actually stayed on after telling them I was done with school as a quote unquote adjunct, teaching like Math 100, Math 200 to the college students at that school. And then while I was doing all of this, trying to figure out what I was going to do for the rest of my life, PFL reached out to me and they said, hey, got this tech called Marketo, and we realized you probably should have someone staffing it. Like it's not actually magic and doesn't do its own thing by itself.
You mean the automation and marketing automation wasn't truly automated without somebody doing some work?
Crazy, right? You never would have known.
Yeah.
So yeah, they called me and like, do you want to come run it? And I was like, you know what? I would love to make some money. So sure. And left grad school, officially wiped my hands clean of that. Went to PFL as their Marketo administrator. So like everyone else in this industry, I could say it found me. I did not find this industry, but I like it. Pretty much immediately was like, this is so much more fun than what I was doing before, because I can literally see the results of what I'm doing. And I'm helping other people do their jobs better. I'm seeing seeing how people are responding to the effort that my team is doing, and it was really cool. So I stayed there for a few years.
That's great. So did you, I know you said you decided that you didn't love marketing or miss math, but what did you study anything in particular that you think is applicable to what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I know I say I don't actually miss it. I don't miss like the theoretical mathematic abstract, whatever, but I do actually love implementing a lot of what I've learned. So I had a heavy focus in analysis. So there's different types of analysis: statistical analysis, numerical analysis. I'm not going to list them all. There's a lot of types. But I did a lot of focus in numerical analysis, which is tangential to statistics and has a lot of applications actually in the work that I do. So even at PFL, at one point, Daniel, who is our CMO, said, "Hey, can you go find a data provider that we can integrate with the PFL solution and just make sure you find the best one?" And I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" And he's like, "Well, like the most accurate data on people." And I was like, okay. And I was able to use, my experimental techniques that I had learned through doing statistical analysis, as well as like the actual analysis. So how do we set up a program where we buy data from a whole bunch of different sources? How do we validate and test against real human data? How do we get them to actually consent to this processing? This was pre-GDPR and stuff, but like we did have to, you got to know if it's right or not. The best way to do it is to ask them, "Hey, is this actually your address?" So anyway, that was kind of the beginning of my love for experimentation within my work. That kicked it all off. And I've been kind of trying to implement those strategies ever since.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. This is what you didn't know is that literally the last episode we recorded, which hasn't gone published yet, so this will be 2 in a row, where I'm trying really hard to not get on my soapbox about the importance of understanding how to do data analysis for marketing ops folks. I think it's a skill gap. I actually think it's a pretty significant skill gap in general. I think, you are one of, I would say a relatively small minority. This is my opinion. I don't know that it's totally true about how, who really know how to understand data, how to understand statistics, and are not easily swayed by statistics that I don't want to say they're made up by some people, but the methodology behind them is questionable. How about that?
Yes, exactly.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. So I think I love that it's 2 in a row where I get to get on that soapbox. So I won't belabor it, but I think it's a big gap. So, and you're enjoying your new solopreneur work. Is that, you've been kind of bounced around a little bit, and it's good.
Yeah, I did some agency work for a while. I've been in-house, both, IC mops, running different size teams and everything. And now I've been solo I just had my 1-year anniversary, and I'm very excited about it. And it's been great.
Hey everyone, Mike Rizzo here, CEO of MarketingOps.com and co-host of OpsCast. I've got a little secret to share with you, something that's been one of the best kept perks of our community until now. At MarketingOps.com, we've built a hiring program that's changing the game for marketing operations recruitment, and we're finally sharing it with the world. Our community is over 22,000 strong, and within that, we have over 4,400 members who are actively and passively seeking new opportunities. These are seasoned professionals with skills and experience spanning platforms like HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, and so much more. Plus, we can help you fine-tune your outreach, targeting exactly the right candidates by region, years of experience, seniority level, or even agency experience. But here's the real cherry on top. When you hire through our program, your new team member gets a free membership or a virtual ticket to our annual conference. From day one, they're not just stepping into a new role, they're getting access to the training, networking, and support they need to hit the ground running. So if you're ready to unlock this incredible opportunity, it's time to let this secret out. Visit marketingops.com and find your next star teammate today. Thanks for listening. And as always, keep optimizing.
That's awesome. I wish I could do I know there's like sound things here. Maybe we could do one here. Let's see. How about this one? Oh,
I can't hear it, but I'm sure it's great.
all right. So there you go. There's the extent of my production knowledge. Okay. So let's jump into it. Yeah. One of the things that I think you and I've talked about, or definitely have trade messages out, and I've probably talked to other people about, is that, a lot of people still use the term funnel, right? Sales marketing funnel in kind of a traditional model. I know what my opinion is, but do you think that is still a model that truly applies today, and like why or why not?
Yes, that is such a loaded question, by the way, but yes, I can tackle it. So
I'm the master of that.
That's the point of these, right? It's really funny because depending on the context you asked me that in, I would give a different answer. So I very strongly believe in the value of modeling your buyer journey, understanding the behavior of your customers and your leads, and using that to develop a strategy. What I think is different today, if you think back to 10-ish years ago, like the Serious Decisions model that was kind of the foundation that everyone probably knows today, even if not by name.
Yep.
You've got your early leads, your MQLs, your SALs, SQLs, closed won, and like that's the model that all, at least B2B SaaS, is using. And there's a lot of value in having a place to start. Like if you don't know where to start, I still think that's a good place to start. And at the root of that, the natural human behavior of having your awareness, your consideration, and your decision, that's like how we as people are. So that's never going to change. But I do think that prescriptive stage by stage, those exact stages, it's not dead, but it's not as prescriptive as it used to be, because information is so much more accessible than it has been before.
Yeah.
It's so much easier for people to say, oh, get on my Slack community and say, hey, I'm thinking of buying this. How much is it?
Yeah.
Is it good or not? And they can skip all the way to the end. They could be all the way at the end here and then find out about a competitor and jump back. Like there's a lot more, I think, of people moving back and forth between their level of commitment to the buying cycle, that it's just not as structured as it used to be.
Yeah. And I think you make a good distinction about the buying journey. I think has changed quite a bit. So I think you're right. I agree where people, and I just mostly go somewhat by my N of one, right? Me, how I have bought in the recent past. And I tend to do a lot of research in surges, right? When I have a moment of time, I'll do a bunch of digging, and then I may not have time again to come back to it for a while. And then, I may find a competitor. I may talk to people. I was recently reevaluating my most recent job. I was evaluating a different marketing automation platform, and I didn't go to that vendor.
Right.
And the vendor probably would have had no idea about it until a partner introduced me to someone there, which I actually hadn't asked for, and I didn't want, because I wanted to kind of stay under the radar. And it was fine. Like I don't mind doing that, but I was really trying to just sort of dig on my own. And I think that's more common today than ever. I also agree with you that I think it's still, I think I'm familiar with the Serious Decisions model, and I like it in general. But I think about it like I do with how I try to manage my inbox, which I don't tend to delete anything. So for those of you who are inbox zero people and that really gets to you, like you might want to pause and skip over this section.
That's me, so.
Yeah. But when I do organize my inbox, the only thing I tend to do is I do it based on time period, because any other attempt at trying to organize it has always ended up with, it's either too granular and you got to make the choice. Do I go in A or B or C? And any one of them would be as good. And you choose one. And then when you're trying to find stuff, you can't find it because it's not in the place where you expect it. Or it just simply has too many breakdowns. And I think a simpler model, right? You talked about like the like a 3rd stage. I'd be much more of a fan of something like that than something that's got a lot of amount of detail. Now, you may have more detail in the background because you're doing some things about evaluating likelihood to close, et cetera, and all that kind of stuff. But I think at some point, really, it's hard to break it down below that, knowing that doesn't really match up with the way people are buying, particularly technology these days. It may still be more applicable in other businesses.
I mean, that's a good point, though, right? Like, this is very B2B SaaS conversation that we're having right now. And I work with a few companies that don't follow that model out, but their life cycle is nothing like the serious decision ones. Like, so it's almost like apples to oranges.
Yeah. And I think, I also think that the effectiveness of some of those is challenged when you've got very different typical, purchase size, right? A high ticket item.
Yeah.
And or when the sales cycle is really long.
That's so true. I mean, I bought like $100 piece of tech today and I thought about it for like 3 seconds because I didn't want to waste time. So yeah, it's very different.
Right.
You have to really think through what am I still going to be selling to this person a year from now? Probably very different.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. So I think we're in alignment there. I still think, like, in general, I think that concept is there's nuance to where it fits and whether it matches now, I think, is where we both landed. So, all right. So what the other thing that I think, this is where we might get into a little more of a debate about the effectiveness of it. One of the things that I've seen in my own experience and definitely heard about is that in this traditional waterfall model or some sort of funnel model of how you're tracking your funnel, right? One of the ideas is that if you can kind of work backwards to how many leads do I need at the top of my funnel in a certain amount of time to ultimately get down to how much revenue am I going to get? And then, or you can work backwards, right? This is our revenue target. At this point, we need to work backwards. We know our conversion rates, right? Or can we affect our conversion rates? So do you think that kind of modeling can still work today, or do we need to be thinking about something different with these new buying behaviors?
So I have thoughts on that that I will share. I have lots of thoughts. So there's 2 things I want to drill into. The first thing being, I love what you said about, kind of maintaining a constant, right? It's not I need X amount of dollars next year. So this year I need X amount of leads. It's like, in order to continuously maintain a revenue stream, I need to continuously be pulling in X volume at each, let's say, stage. I actually really like that because it instead of us having a end of quarter panic every quarter or month, it really provides this mentality of consistent, scalable growth that is a lot more stable.
Who do you know that's panicking at the end of a quarter or a month?
Oh, nobody. That's, on my head.
Those are the outliers.
Right, the outliers. Yeah, we've all been there. So I really appreciate that mindset. It's interesting because in terms of like forecasting and planning, we do still have targets we have to reach. So we do still kind of have to do some back calculation. And it's interesting because what we talked about earlier about all that nuances and like how people are harder to measure where they're at. And a lot of times we don't even know their names until they say, I would like a demo because I probably want to give you my money. It's so much harder to plan for that lack of communication with prospects that we had in the past. Unfortunately, I almost see it as a bit of a necessary evil though, because we do actually still have to find a way to like measurably track our progress against our numbers. And it might look, what it used to look like was I need X MQLs to hit my opportunity number. What it might look like now more is I need some combination of MQLs and visits on my website and mentions in social as not that those are necessarily the people that are going to buy, but it's indicative trends of the buying behavior you're going to be seeing.
So it's like leading indicators, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is why they should never be targets. They should be indicators.
Yeah.
Side note, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you need to, depending on how far ahead they are in terms of leading, right? You need to take that into account too, right? That there's a correlation from that to, something downstream based on your best knowledge. So, we mentioned already the idea that like you might go into a Slack group like marketingops.com Slack and you ask for questions like how, I wonder, is there a way to have that visible? There probably is. And I don't want to know about it as much as I know about how much data there is about people. But that seems to be part of that, the term I hear is dark web or dark funnel, right?
Dark funnel,
so, is there, have you found anybody who's figured out ways to sort of identify some of that, or is it still not really there?
It's really funny that you bring this up. I've never heard of anyone doing this successfully, but it could just be because I haven't heard of it. But I did talk to someone this morning who shall remain nameless, who just told me they want to work on a secret project that is like literally that. So keep an eye out. Maybe in 6 months we'll get a new product for it.
Well, I can imagine, right? So, okay. So so there's two sides of this. You brought up I was thinking about this as sort of going backwards and trying to set targets for the early stage stuff. I think you also were talking about, you also want organizations typically want good predictability on revenue and pipeline looking forward. How do you see that being affected by this sort of changing buyer behavior, the predictive models, if you will, on how that's happening?
So I've seen this a lot, especially at my last in-house couple of roles that I've had, where I think so we as marketers are at the very beginning of everything that we can track, at least in terms of getting people prepared to talk to sales. And what I've seen happen so often is like if marketing does something really good and all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of people on our website or a whole bunch of mentions in social media or something that creates a buzz, that buzz escalates either to sales or up or both. And everyone's like, well, how can we capitalize on this? And then they start cold calling all the people that liked your really cool LinkedIn post, or, they ask for a list of all the people that downloaded that page that day. And then all of a sudden you have just turned your list of people who are so interested in this one thing you did, who could have been nurtured and brought into your sales funnel down the road when they're good and ready, and you've turned them off because now they're annoyed because you called them when they weren't ready. And now what we had tried to build 6 to 12 months from now, what would have been like a surge in 6 to 12 months is probably going to be about the same. Like we probably didn't hurt anything in terms of like denting our numbers by calling them, but we could very well have missed out on an opportunity to like really nurture those relationships. Now that I'm saying this, I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think that we like just need to be more aware of how we as marketers are trying to do this like long game. And we need to be appreciative and respectful of the, impact that that's going to have.
Sure. Right. Yeah. That's what you're talking about is you're undermining trust.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Right. That's what you're doing if you potentially, right. And I think some of it has to do with how you do it. So literally right before we started recording, I got a phone call out of the blue and I answered it because I try to answer unless it clearly tells me it's spam, but it was from, I had posted something on a Slack group today and someone else must have told them about it. And I got this call and it took me a minute to try to figure out where it came from. And I was fairly tolerant of it. And I was able to, I'd already done something with it. So, but it was that kind of thing, what you just described. And it was like, all right, I appreciate the effort. Right. So I don't mind that, but it was unexpected for sure.
Yeah. I get it. Like as a business owner now, and you want to jump on all the leads because you don't want to miss something and you want things to move. But it's hard to trust the process sometimes because you just don't know.
Yeah. Are you saying that sales is hard, Rachel?
Me? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something I learned the hard way earlier in my career, that sales is really effing hard. And when I thought that it was not. So for all of our listeners who complain and moan about their salespeople and how lazy they are, I encourage you at some point to go do some cold calling and see how you feel about it later.
Oh, yeah. We won't talk about this too much, but I did spend a very short stint, like measured on number of days on my fingers, but doing SDR work because I was on a team that was like standing up an SDR team. And we were trying to like figure out reasonable metrics and stuff. Holy cow. For all of you SDRs, y'all have my mad respect because 10 calls a day. Psh, I can make 10 calls a day. I make 10 calls a day as a consultant. For some reason, it's so much harder than it sounds. So yeah, lots of respect for that.
No, it's the getting over that fear of just placing the call, and I have been hung up on, and it is. Luckily, I was somewhat prepared for it, and I actually have laughed it off. That said, it's demotivating if it happens on a regular basis. So, selling is not for the faint of heart, and it requires a certain kind of sort of person, I think, to do it well.
I agree.
So, and the SDRs in particular, I think you're right. They're in a position where like I give a lot of slack to people complain about getting pitch slapped on LinkedIn or something, and I'm pretty tolerant of that. I either ignore it or I send feedback or I answer it directly and say I'm not interested. But it's just it's hard. All right, so so in my experience, like that's being predictable on ultimately revenue has really been a necessity for boards, for senior leadership, depending on the type of company, right? And I've even been at places where a new GM came in and missed numbers because the numbers he was seeing didn't match up with reality. And instead of fixing the process, basically forced people to do a whole different one through spreadsheets, which was crazy.
Oh yeah, been there.
So, and I think this becomes even bigger of a challenge when you've got opportunity, when your sales cycle is really long, right? Because then you've got all kinds of other things. So, in your experience, right, have you seen companies doing, some amount of inspection at the opportunity stage that is a combination of marketing and sales, or, SDR, BDR and sales? And do you see that, like, where have you seen that? Like, what are the things that you've seen that have made those that either be more or less successful, if you can put a finger on it?
Actually, I have a very specific couple of examples from that. So I went through a transformation project on this exact thing at a certain role, which I will not name, but we had this system that was not working, where opportunities were being pushed a lot. So we would say, oh, we have X pipeline that's going to be booked this quarter, and then like 5% was being booked, and all of the opportunities that had a close date were still open. They just all of a sudden had a close date of the end of the next quarter. And these opportunities, we realized, are like 6 years old.
Yeah, I'm sure no one else has seen this.
Shocking news, right? Like a headline. And I've also had an experience where let's say the sales reps may or may not have been deleting opportunities instead of marking them close lost, which of course makes your close rate look better because your denominator is lower. So both of these situations, the target the metric that was incorrectly represented was a target metric for the sales team. So at the first company I mentioned, their coverage was a target. At the second company I mentioned, their target was in one of them, not obviously the only one, but was an X close rate. And so they figured out the system. This is how I can manipulate the data to meet my target. And to be honest, I don't really sales is hard. I mean, I Obviously, I would never do anything wrong ever. But like we can kind of understand the psychology behind it. That really the problem is that those are the wrong metrics to be measured by.
What are the right metrics?
That's the age-old question. I mean, for sales, it's a lot easier to just say, let's look at quota, let's look at revenue dollars brought in. Maybe we could look at pipeline. Marketing, it's so much harder. Well, okay. Well, since you asked about sales, I'll just give the easy answer. Money. Money's the right answer.
Revenue.
Right.
Well, I mean, if you really want to get to it, like you need payment, like collected revenue, right?
Yes. ARR, as some companies might go by.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's funny that you're right. I mean, things get manipulated. What I started seeing it at one company, and this was relatively, well, it was a range, but anywhere from 4 or 5 figure products to 6 and 7 figure products, right? It's kind of a wide range depending on the product set. When I was doing some stuff, I was actually built a custom attribution model, which we could argue about whether or not that made sense. But what I started noticing is that, because I was always pulling opportunity data every month to do like feed it into my analysis, and I started noticing the average time to close was like 21 days. I was like, "There's no way that can be right."
Well, I see where this is going.
So there was another way of manipulating it, right? Which was they were waiting until things were pretty sure, right, and then putting them in.
Yeah.
And again, I agree with you. Like, I don't think that it was necessarily a nefarious thing. I'm sure there was some of that, but it was, you kind of get what you measure, and so and so and at that same place, there were some long-term contracts with either government or quasi-government agencies where they had like a standing contract, and literally opportunities would open and close and open and close.
Sure. Yeah.
And even worse is it only has we were using Sales Logics, not Salesforce, but the opportunity value would change too to match the most recent purchase order, basically.
Yeah.
So when I would be pulling historical stuff and trying to I'm like, what happened here? So for those of you who are in marketing ops, if you have not spent time looking at your opportunity data in your CRM, you can uncover some really interesting things. One where you and I met, that place, I think this was before you were pulled in. I was trying to figure out why I was seeing in our influence revenue reporting opportunities that had been created 2 years prior to us ever implementing marketing automation. And it had to do with a very specific business practice that was not hidden. It was a well-known thing because the CRM was not used just for capturing demand stuff. It was also used as a project management platform. So for delivering products or the services, actually, in this case, but
this is bringing back some memories.
Yes. So, memories, I don't, not great memories on some things like that. But I remember going to that, and I remember talking to a sales director afterwards. I was like, what? Like, where is this coming from? So like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And then I was like, oh, wait, there's also 2 others. Like, what's going on here?
And then suddenly you find this whole world that you didn't know about.
Yeah. So this is where being able to dig into data and understand it, you can uncover these things that, whether it's formal or informal things that are happening that can affect all these predictions. So, okay. So another thing that I've seen, again, with long-term kinds of sales cycles and large deal sizes, is a challenge with turnover. So turnover both in the sales team as well as in the customer side. So have you run into this, and have you seen anybody that's figured out how to manage that well? Let's just keep it simple, right? Just on the sales side, right?
Yeah. Like in terms of how to maintain the data predictability and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Actually I worked at a company that had a really, it wasn't 100% perfect, but had actually a really solid way of doing this. I was really impressed. Large company. So they had a lot more resources than like a single person sales ops or revenue ops person might be. But, there's two components. There's the technical side and there's like the internal comms people side of it.
Yep.
That kind of help with this. So on that Salesforce actual like instance, they had built out a really robust set of processes that happen when someone leaves. So everything from making sure every single lead contact, opportunity account, task, whatever case that is assigned to them gets reassigned to the right person. That would include little prompts for sales where they, as they were offboarding, they were offboarded with their sales work early enough that they could go through and like write these comprehensive notes on everything. So if your opportunity is open, they would leave a closeout note. If they had an open lead, they would leave a closeout note, whatever. And whoever received the new object record, that person would be actually, they carved out time for those people to make sure that they were able to review those notes, ask questions as needed, and really have a firm understanding of what's going on. And those notes weren't just a general text box either. They had like a checklist with questions like this task. What is the purpose of this task? What is the intended outcome of this task? What value rated from low to high of this task? To get these things that like are almost instinctual behaviors out of sales reps' heads and into the next one's head. It was very time consuming, one, to set up all of these automations, and also like sales spent a lot of time on this. And so that's something the company had to account for, right? But it was very successful. I was really impressed with how that worked. And the other thing was cultivating that mindset of being willing to, oh, so-and-so has left or is starting. Part of my job that I'm not getting commission on, but it could produce commission potentially, is really understanding what they're leaving behind.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm not sure. I mean, that is extremely robust. And I've seen lighter weight versions of those. I think the takeaway for me, and I think the takeaway for our audience, especially if you want to be seen as a little more strategic and thinking about the overall business, is you can advocate for, hey, if we really want to have predictability in our pipeline, we'll make sure that the data is clean, and we set a norm within the organization that data is important. And a part of that is not just like most companies have a pretty good job of onboarding. I'm sure there are exceptions, but offboarding is where things can really get screwed up. And I think that's the point, where there should also be a process that's very deliberate that says when someone leaves, these are the things we do. And it should include everything from all those reassignments. It probably needs like who's going to monitor that person's inbox for a period of time, what kind of reply is going to be, like all those things should be a part of it. And if you can be the one suggesting that because you're you're inspecting the data, you can go like, hey, I'm seeing this issue of a cat walking in front of the screen.
Sorry about that.
That's just the way it goes. We roll with it here. So I think like that's a discipline that's really important, and I think it's overlooked. It's that kind of stuff. Like it's not a tech thing, but I'm a big fan of like basic blocking, tackling stuff matters.
Well, exactly, right? Like we as ops people, that is our job, is not just to like do it, but to make it matter. We got to show if I go in and do like get some knowledge out of this information, we can actually make decisions based on that will improve the outcomes for our company.
Right.
We make it matter.
Yeah, no, I think let's talk to a boss of mine who I said, I think we need to spend time on cleaning up our data. I want to bring in a tool for validating email addresses. And I said, this is not sexy stuff. And she was like, no, that's really good. Like that is sexy. I was like, thank you. Like, I think it's like, not everybody's got a marketing leader who's got that kind of mindset.
Oh no, definitely not.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that nobody really sees, but will pay dividends, right? And that's the hard part, is articulating that. But when you can
Yeah.
show that you're making improvements and you're getting better decisions made and you're more predictable and all those things, right? It becomes it does matter and people will pay attention.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So one of the other things you and I talked about, well, we didn't talk about this actually. So since we talked, you published something, I think it was on LinkedIn. I can't remember. Maybe it was on your website about pipeline coverage. And I think you hinted at it here earlier, which is traditionally a sales metric. But you were suggesting that actually maybe it's a metric we should be looking at earlier stages where it's more of a marketing part of the buyer journey funnel. So what triggered that for you? Like, why do you think that's an important metric for marketers? And are there other signals like that you think would make sense for early stage predictability of the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, so it started with a client asking me to help them figure out that, how do we get some predictability in the earlier stages of our funnel? And I've toyed with this idea for a while before kind of implementing rustic versions of this at other companies. But, so for just a quick refresh, so pipeline coverage, we just say let's say we're looking for next quarter. How many opportunities do we have that are open right now with the close date of next quarter? How does that compare to our target for next quarter? Does that, obviously we want it to line up. Ideally, we'd have way more because not everything.
It's usually some multiplier, right? Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
2x, 3x, 4x. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So we would like to be maybe, 4x covered in pipeline. And there are lots of things that sales teams do to figure out what should their coverage be in order to give them the best chance at success. And as marketers, we don't have the luxury of having a close date on our leads. However, okay, so like, for example, someone doesn't fill out a form and say, I'm probably going to MQL in 3 days, but we do have the availability of the rest of our data to make data-driven decisions based on how likely we think certain people are going to progress down our funnel. So we can use other data to predict how likely is it that, X person will convert from stage to stage to eventually get passed over to sales. And honestly, I like that. It's instead of saying based on arbitrary data, what is our close date, we actually get to have data driven information. So we can kind of back calculate, based on conversion time, conversion rates, basically all of our juicy stuff in our database to figure out how many people do we need to be getting into each stage continually based on what our future targets should be. And it's, like I mentioned earlier, this is not like an OKR. Like we should never say we need to have X MQL coverage in order to hit whatever target next quarter, but it's a good indicator for us to be able to roll with the punches and pivot quickly as needed.
Yeah, I mean, you when you say OKR, you mean for marketing overall as a right? Okay,
exactly.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I've been at least one or two places where marketing was measured on contribution and was measured on MQLs and SALs and SQLs, and inevitably there was a squeeze on how much program spend there could be, and those targets went up, and you could drive volume. It was pretty consistent with like the more you spent, the more the volume went up on the early stage. Conversion rates dropped, and I was always pushing for hold us accountable for the end number, right? Yeah. Pipeline or revenue, whichever that is, and let us figure out how we get there.
Yes, beautifully said. I agree.
Yeah. So, because then you're held accountable. That's not. I was never advocating for not measuring those things.
Right.
Right. Because they can be, early indicators of problems and things like that. So I think that's good. Sorry, this just popped into my head as we were talking though, but what you're talking about with that sort of pipeline coverage model for earlier stages in the funnel, do you think there's a place for AI machine learning tools to help make that better over time? Like, so it sort of learns what your data looks like instead of it being based on some point in time measure of conversion rates or time and stage and all that, it's kind of evolving as your business is evolving?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all of our modeling, there's an opportunity for that because everything gets stale, everything from coverage to like attribution modeling to lead scoring, which may or may not become obsolete through this entire thing. Like AI can help you, one, make sure everything is continuously updated so your model is always using the most recent information, and two, help you think of things that you didn't even think of before, right? Like the current way that I'm doing it for this one client is based on us saying, I know how many MQLs I had, but I mean, there were people who heard about me, my company, that I never even knew because, like you said, they waited until they were ready to get a demo. So AI, can bring in a lot more kind of those factors that we hadn't.
Yeah,
really
I don't know how many times I've said this even in just the last few days, but like I was a relative skeptic on AI machine learning, and I think it's because for marketing in particular, it's because I think everyone was gravitating towards content. I mean, I think there's a place for it, but I think as I'm no expert, right? As I understand it, right, something like a model like ChatGPT is really dependent on what it has to reference to do that kind of language model. So if you're doing relatively proprietary stuff and you can't take advantage of a huge data set, the likelihood that's going to help there is low. What I have thought for a while, though, is that I, just like you said, right, finding patterns, what our audience couldn't see is you were doing close read, I know, right, air quotes, is sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you've got a tool that can really sift through data and find patterns that are not necessarily as obvious to us, or ones that we, let's be honest, right, sometimes we don't want to consider for whatever reason. Yeah. I mean, I think to me, that's where I actually expect way more value to come from these platforms in the future. So I'm excited. I'm glad it sounds like you're on the same page where like I think there's some huge value that could come from that.
Oh yeah. All right. Definitely.
So, okay. One last, I think I'll tee this up like a softball question for you. So we talked about OKRs for marketing. Do you have any opinion about what marketing operations should be measured on, or all of marketing, right? You said revenue for marketing and maybe that's it, but what about marketing operations?
Yeah, I love that question. I have been responsible for defining them multiple times, and it's always like this, it really depends on blah, blah, blah. So I'll start with this. Both times I've been asked to define marketing's OKRs for the marketing ops OKRs for the various teams that I've been on. My approach has been, let's figure out what the value that marketing ops is bringing to marketing and to the org, and let's figure out a way to hold ourselves accountable for maintaining that value. So, for example, one thing that marketing ops can offer a lot of value and should to an organization is getting things out the door, right? Are we executing things in a way flawlessly that increases engagement and best represents our brand? And that can look like, X turnaround time for things, meeting SLAs, like that's kind of custom to your business. Like, how do you make sure that's successful? And then on the other hand, we can provide value by bringing actionable insights that people might not have been aware of, or even if they are aware of, like we help define that action. So for, the companies that I've worked on, those were both a little custom, but it was, having X amount of, actually, I'm trying not to say something that I can't say, but like X amount of impact on these strategic decisions that, even lead to increases in pipeline or life cycle or whatever. Marketing ops isn't responsible for pipeline directly, but like marketing ops can be responsible for helping increase the quality of leads.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Database, you could have metrics for database quality.
Yeah.
and coverage, things like that. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think this is a tough one, and I'm like you. I've gone back and forth about what we should have as our OKR. I've had revenue or pipeline ones before as a marketing ops leader, and I initially thought that was a good idea, and then I've shifted simply because it's so much is out of your control.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's great. This has been fun. It's always fun hanging out with you, Rachel.
Always fun.
Yeah. So our audience doesn't know, we chatted for 15 minutes before we started. We forgot that we were supposed to be recording. So
it's always a good time.
Yeah, always. Well, Rachel, thank you. If folks want to, learn more about what you're doing with Moby, or just keep up with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can hit me up on LinkedIn or shoot me an email. I'm just Rachel Never mind. I'll send that. I'll put the email in the link so y'all can see it. But yeah, LinkedIn is also great.
Well, we'll definitely link you in when I post about it on LinkedIn. You're also on the marketingops.com Slack, right?
I am, and you should probably see me pop up from time to time because I can't keep my mouth shut.
Well, you're in a safe space here because I am the same. Well, good. Hey, Rachel, it's a lot of fun as usual. Next time, to our listeners, thank you for continuing to support us, and I look forward to bringing even more fun guests with you later, and hopefully Mike and Naomi will join soon. Until then, bye everyone.